everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Al Pacino's Prison Scene, the podcast where we, Jake and Thomas, look at movies that objectively have no deeper meaning and we think about it. As always, I'm your host, Thomas, and with me is my co host, Jake.
Guy! Joshy!
So, for those of you that are uneducated, you have, of course, read the title of this episode. And no, we are not talking about your parents. However, if you want to send us a video of your parents, I would be happy to tell you the deeper meaning of their actions. Today, we're discussing the movie called Mom and Dad, starring my favorite actor of all time, Nicolas Cage.
So I was going to ask you, but obviously we both agree. I think that Nic Cage, there's always a question, genius or crazy man? And my answer is, he's a goddamn genius. And there's no arguing about that.
He plays a crazy man very well, though.
Yes, he does, including Ghost Rider. He's crazy in that, too.
And I do think, so first of all, we probably wouldn't be discussing this movie if Nicolas Cage was not in it. I think that is a fact.
Yes.
But second of all, I think this would be a very different movie if Nicolas Cage wasn't in it. Because there's certain things that he does with his performance that I think another actor wouldn't have done. And we can talk about that later, but it's interesting to me.
I want to say, so we've both seen this movie before. And the first time around, I was like, okay, this movie's weird. But after rewatching it with an analytical eye, I think this movie is insanely good.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you there. This movie is not as well known as the other movies we have discussed. So if the listener, would like to watch it before you finish listening to our podcast, it is available on Hulu. And it's definitely available to rent on Amazon if it's not available to stream on Amazon. So it's very accessible if you want to go watch it and then come back. But fair warning, this movie is not for the faint of heart. There is quite a bit of gore, so be ready for that. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into a recap now that everyone who wants to see the movie has left.
All right. Well, before we get into the actual episode, one thing I want to mention that I did not mention in our last episode of Ghostbusters, maybe I did. I don't think I did. I just want to point out that Rick Moranis and Mike Myers are the same person.
All right. I'm not going to get you to elaborate further on that.
Just think about it.
All right. So, Mom and Dad. All right. The movie opens with a mom and presumably her son. I don't know. There's a kid in a car seat. You don't really see him. They're sitting in a car, and then the mom gets out of the car. And then the camera pans out, and we see that the car is sitting on a train track, and a train plows through the car with the baby in the front seat. And that's how the movie opens, right? And then we go to our main family, and they're kind of, I would say, dysfunctional. Very clearly a dysfunctional family. The daughter's on their phone, talking to her boyfriend, being like, haha, I'm going to see you tonight. And the son comes in, and he's like, yo, mom says, come downstairs right now, or something like that. And throws her underwear at him. And then she's like, I'm going to kill you. And then they go downstairs. And the family is arguing with each other the whole time. And on the TV, there's a news report of the train incident that opened the movie. And the mom is like, hey, can you turn that off? Not before breakfast. Come on. So they're very clearly desensitized and don't really care about the outer world outside of themselves. And their cleaning lady's like, oh, yes, ma'am. I'll turn it off right now. And then the daughter's like, hey, can I go out with my boyfriend tonight? And then Nicolas Cage, the dad, is like, no, I don't like your boyfriend. Plus, my parents are coming tonight, so you got to come anyways. Then the daughter's like, well, mom's probably not going to be here because her sister's going to have her baby. And the mom's like, well, that's none of your business. So the mom and the daughter go to school. Or the mom takes the daughter to school, and the dad goes to work, and the son stays home with the maid and the maid's daughter. So on the road to school, the mom and the daughter are discussing, and they're like, oh, you're so self-absorbed in your phone. Why you're always Facebooking? And then she's like, oh, Mom, you wouldn't get it. And so the daughter gets dropped off at school, and the mom goes to her hot yoga class. I guess she doesn't have a job. She never goes to work for the movie. And then the son who was left at home, sees the maid bash her daughter's head in with like like mallet, some sort of kitchen mallet. I don't know exactly what it was. And then he runs and hides. And then we don't see them again for a while. And so the mom is at hot yoga, and then she's talking to her friend who's like, man, I wish we were back hot and single when we were young. And the mom's like, well, I don't, it's not that bad. And then her friend is like, it's bad. And so then back at school, the daughter and the daughter's friend get in trouble with their teacher, and he takes their phone and he starts talking about planned obsolescence, which I think is important, but we'll get back to that later. And then all of a sudden, these kids keep getting called to the office, and the teacher's like, what's going on? And nobody knows what's happening. And then the fire alarm gets pulled, and all the kids go outside, and like a majority of the kids' parents are like standing at a gate being fended off by police officers trying to get to their kids. And then a kid jumps over the fence, and his mom stabs him in the neck with her car keys. And so then all the kids freak out and start trying to leave and escape, and the parents are chasing them down. But then our character, the daughter and her friend, they escape to the daughter's friend's house, where presumably the mom is at home. But they go into the kitchen, and like the daughter's friend smokes a joint, I think, and they check the blender, and there's a drink freshly made. So obviously somebody's home. But then the daughter starts watching the news, and she's like, hey, something weird's going on. But her friend goes upstairs. So the friend doesn't know what's happening. And then when the friend goes upstairs, she finds her mom, which is the main family's mom's friend from hot yoga. She finds her mom. This probably sounds very confusing, but I'm not going to do a better job of explaining it. She finds her mom upstairs, like cutting up her clothes or something like that. And then she strangles her with a belt. So then our main family daughter goes up the stairs, sees what's happening, and then runs and leaves. And she's scared because she doesn't really understand what's happening, and she thinks that people are just trying to murder her. So now we go back to the main mom, who has got a phone call. And, well, actually, first, she goes to this guy because she used to be a model, and she goes to this guy who she used to model for, and then he's like, I don't know, you're not worth it anymore. So then she goes and cries in her car for a little bit, but then she gets a phone call from her sister, and her sister's like, yo, I'm having the baby right now. She's like, okay, I'll be right there. So they go to the hospital. The sister has the baby, but she immediately starts trying to kill the baby because the monitor in her hospital room, static comes on the monitor, and it drives her a little crazy, and she starts trying to kill the baby. So then our mom takes the baby, and she shows that she is very maternal with the child and very protective. She doesn't want to give it back to the doctors, but eventually she does. All right, so then we come back home. Actually, we're not back home yet. Then the daughter, while she's trying to run home, runs into her boyfriend, who was taking the SAT or something earlier in the day and did good and left. And then when he went home, his dad tried to kill him, and he killed his dad in self-defense. So the daughter runs into him, and he's like, yo, I know what's going on. Parents are trying to kill their kids. We got to go get your brother. And so they go home, and the cleaning lady's trying to mop up the blood of her daughter. And they're like, oh, my God, you need to leave. And she's like, no, I got to clean up the mess. And they're like, okay, whatever. And so the sister goes upstairs to find Joshua, her brother, and he's under the bed, and he's like, yo, where's mom and dad? I'm scared. And she's like, we can't go to mom and dad. They're going to just don't worry about it. But then the dad comes home, and he sees the boyfriend, who he does not like. And he's like, yo, get out of my house. And the boyfriend's like, no. And I don't remember exactly what happens after that. But then the daughter and the son come down the stairs, and the dad starts trying to kill them, but he trips and falls on one of the toys that Joshua left lying around the house. And then the mom comes home, and she's like, I'm going to save my kids. And like on the radio, she hears that it is your instinct as a parent to want to go to your kids, but you need to stay away because you're going to kill them. But she doesn't listen to that because she's like, I'm their mom. I know it's best. But then when she gets there and sees them, she starts trying to kill them as well. And Joshua and the daughter go and hide in the basement. And the mom and the dad get this brilliant plan to fill the basement with gas and try to suffocate their children. But the children are a little smarter, and they tape matches to the door, so that way when they open the door, the gas will be lit up and explode. So then that happens, and then this fight ensues. Blah 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 blah, and then as soon as the mom and dad are about to kill their kids, the doorbell rings, and then the mom's like, oh, "Your parents," and the dad's like, "Oh no, I forgot about that." And so then his parents come in and start trying to kill him, but they don't try to kill their grandkids. And then this whole kerfuffle happens, and both of his parents end up getting killed. And then the main mom and dad get knocked out. And then we're all in the basement, and the mom and the dad are tied to a pole, and the daughter, the son, and the daughter's boyfriend are on this other pole in the basement. And they're obviously scared, but we're not sure, us, the audience, we're not sure if the parents are better or they still want to kill them. So first, they start to try to plead with their kids, be like, look, we don't want to hurt you. We love you. We're not going to do anything. But then the daughter's like, we love you too, but I don't know if we can trust you. You're making it so difficult. And then dad freaks out. And that's basically where the movie ends.
All right. Wonderful recap, Thomas. It was a little kind of like, what? But if you're still here, that means you watched the movie and you knew exactly what he meant. Now, I want to say this movie has, at least for me, an insane amount of duality and like everything. And not duality, duality.
I'd agree with that, especially with like the parents and the kids. Like even at one point, the dad says like father, like son.
Okay, maybe not duality. Maybe like hypocrisy of some sort. Maybe. We'll talk. We'll talk about it. What do you think is like one of the main themes of this movie? Because I think that you and I looked at this movie very differently.
Well, the biggest theme I think is planned obsolescence, which is what the teacher talks about in the classroom. And so I Googled the definition of planned obsolescence. And so according to Google, planned obsolescence is a policy of producing consumer goods that rapidly become obsolete and so require replacing, achieved by frequent changes in design, termination of the supply of spare parts, and use of non-durable materials. So obviously that's talking about planned obsolescence with the production of consumer goods like the iPhone. Every iPhone is pretty well known now, at least it's a theory. Apple hasn't confirmed it, but every iPhone is built to last basically until the next one comes out, and then it'll start to deteriorate until you get the next one. But there's also this thought of planned obsolescence away from consumer goods. And there's a historian by the name of Russell Jacoby who said that the application of planned obsolescence to thought itself has the same merit as its application to consumer goods. The new is not only shoddier than the old, it fuels an obsolete social system that staves off its replacement by manufacturing the illusion that it is perpetually new. So how I think this ties into the film Mom and Dad is that humans are essentially made to die. I always say that you're only required to do two things. You're required to be born and you're required to die. So from the moment that you were born, you are leading to death. And there's a point in the movie where the mom actually talks about this. But when the teacher is talking about planned obsolescence, he kind of gets distracted. And then the daughter character is like, oh, you were saying how we're the better model of last year. And she's obviously trying to make a joke in the classroom. But I think what the film is trying to say is that the kids are arguably the better models of their parents. And I think this is seen throughout the film, not only in our two parents, but in the other parents, how there's jealousy from the parents to their children. Like at one point, the friend's mom says, I caught her changing the other day, and I just wanted to be like, one day those tits are going to drop, you little whore. So she's, instead of being proud of her daughter for being a beautiful woman, she is jealous of the fact that she has what the mom used to have. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so maybe ours aren't so different after all. I think the end result is the same, but I think that this film is much more about like the family dynamic and just and dysfunction. Not necessarily planned obsolescence, but just kind of like, the ebb and flow of family.
Okay.
That does lead to, to the kids being the better version of our parents.
Well, and I'll even say, like, with as far as dysfunction goes, I noticed that in the beginning of the film, when we're first introduced to all the parents or the whole family, it's in the kitchen, but usually there's not one shot of the family all together. There's like a shot of just the daughter, and like you can see the dad in the background. There's a shot of the dad and the son. And there's a shot of the mom, and they're having a conversation, but it just cuts between these shots. And I think that's supposed to be representative of the separation and distance that the family has with each other.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that we can see this in the scene with the car, and you said it. You said the word. The mom is driving Carly to school, and the mom is like, or her name's Kendall. Kendall is like, "Would you stop Facebooking?" And
Right.
the Carly's like, "It's not Facebooking, you dumb slut." And so yeah, I think that appropriately um, exemplifies that disconnect between the family, like you're talking about.
It even like very early in the film when the daughter says, "I'm going to kill you," she throws something at her brother, but it hits a family portrait and knocks it off the wall. So I think like in the opening minutes, the film is trying to say, "Hey, this family, even though they may seem together on the outside, which they really even don't really seem like they're together, they are falling apart within. Like any further look into their lives, you could see that this is not a happy family."
But I kind of want to make the point of like, you know, I feel like that is more common than is let on. I feel like there are not. I think there's a functionality in the dysfunction. Like the family still operates.
Right.
Everybody gets to the place on time. Everybody gets fed. Everybody's taken care of. But there is this dysfunction. But it's not enough to like break the family apart.
Maybe because obviously the whole conceit of the film is that the parents around the world or around the country or whatever are killing their children, but specifically their children. So I think it was trying to play on, you know, parental instincts, right? So we've heard there's stories in the real world of parents being like their kids in danger, and this mom was able to like lift a car to save her child,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
she should not be humanly possible. And I think that kind of plays into what you're saying about the function within the dysfunction. The flip side of that would be in this what this movie does, and it like takes the parental instincts and flips them around so that you become inhumanly strong, but now you're trying to kill your children instead of save them. So I think what you're saying about function within the dysfunction plays into that. And I'm not sure if I'm conveying that very well.
No, I get what you mean though. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would say that there's our first moment of that duality. That sort of dualistic hypocrisy kind of like, do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
But I also want to point out. Okay, so the very first shot is we see it later in the film. It's Nic Cage driving his dad's Firebird.
Are you talking about? Is it?
The very first shot. Well, the second shot of the movie.
Okay. Okay.
So okay. Let me
Are you
let me
talking about like the
let me
opening
backtrack.
sequence?
Let me backtrack. The first shot of the scene, or the first shot of the movie, is the one that you talked about. The kid leaving, or the mom leaving the kid in the car. And I think this scene. I think this is a great. I love. I think this is a. Jesus Christ, somebody coming home.
I don't know what's happening.
I think this is a great technique because the very first thing we see is a parent kill their child. Um, we kind of get a feel of what the movie is going to be about, and then later of the entire film until the first murder afterwards happens, we're always on edge. There's always music playing that insinuates that Nic Cage is about to kill his kid. And his performance helps with that a lot. So I wanted to give a shout out to that technique. It was a great job.
Well,
But
and I'll say, but even before, like he sees the static, whatever. Nicolas Cage's character, the father, Brent, seems unhinged throughout this whole movie.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And
I don't think I think he's already on edge the whole time. It's like you see in the flashback when he's making the pool table, and he just absolutely loses it, and he smashes it with a sledgehammer. So he has like this built up resentment of himself because and throughout the film, it's like two or three times it cuts to him like it's inside his head, but in the past, he was doing donuts in the parking lot while a naked girl is sitting on top of him. It's that's the life he longs for. He longs for back in the day when he was that awesome kid, and now he's just this guy who hates his job and is living this bland suburban life. So because of that self resentment, he's always like, oh, I gotta. There's a lot of anger built up inside of him that is released uh, unconditionally once he sees the static and he comes after his kids.
yeah, and let me go along with that for a second. And the character introduction with like the actors' names and who they play, um, introduces kind of like this suburban life. There's a very high superior shot of just a neighborhood. All the houses look exactly the same. What's that movie with Jesse Eisenberg in it?
You gotta give me more than that.
And what's her name in the Art of Self Defense? What's the actress that he likes?
Imogen Poots.
Yes. What's that movie? It's him and it's her
It's
and
him
Jesse.
and her.
Yeah, it's Jesse Eisenberg and him. Oh, Vivarium.
Oh, I haven't seen that. Okay.
Okay. Well, in Vivarium, they get trapped in this neighborhood that everything looks exactly the same, um, and they are stuck in there and they can't get out. And it's this never-ending loop. They try to leave, but it always stays the same. And I think that this shot of suburbia plays excellently into that idea that all these families are dysfunctional. All these families, parents wish for the life that they had before, right?
Right.
And I think that we see these shots that kind of set up these characters, and yeah, it just symbolizes that suburban life. Um, yeah,
Well, and I'll even say, as far as like you're saying, it sets up that there's this image on the surface, but then there's also this image below the surface. There's also there's this thing of you see it in a lot of movies and shows, but then also in real life, parents or adults are unfulfilled with the life that they had because as a child they were so imaginative and had all these great plans. But when you grow up, you run out of time, and you're like, well, I got to get a job, and then you get stuck in a routine. So then you have a kid, and you're like, oh, subconsciously, most people are like, oh, well, this is my second chance. If I didn't get what I wanted, now my kid can have better. But you end up just giving your kid what you wanted.
Almost.
Yeah, you end up making the kid do the things you wished you had done, whether they want to do that or not, and it creates this kind of cyclical nature of parent and child. And I don't know if we necessarily see that in this film, but there is certainly a cycle, most evident in Josh and Brent, the son and the father, with the Firebird, because it is seen in flashbacks, but Josh finds a dead animal outside and puts a dead animal, or it's not dead yet, but it's dying, and he puts the animal in the dad's car, and then he leaves it overnight, and he comes back the next day,
Which
and the animal's
is a bird, isn't it?
I don't think we ever actually see it, but
I think we hear
I
think it like tweets,
well, I don't know.
and it's in a Firebird. Just think about that.
Okay. And then the dad comes home and he's furious because his car smells like death. And that flashback happens early on in the film. But then late in the film, there's another flashback that presumably takes place pretty soon after that one. And it's the dad and the son sitting on the sidewalk eating a popsicle. The dad might have a beer, I'm not sure. But the dad's like, it's all right. When I was a kid, I messed up the car pretty bad too. I wrecked it. and my dad made me buy it and pay it off. And he's basically just saying, like, don't feel so bad. I did the same thing when I was your age. So it's not, in the case of this film, it's not that they are forcing their life upon the kids, or at least with the family that we follow. It's that history repeats itself regardless.
Yeah. Um, and I want to point out kind of there's a bit of hyper realism here also in these first scenes that you're talking about. In that character introduction, Kendall drinks coffee, but she doesn't drink coffee like a real person. She drinks it like with the both hands and like takes a very slow, meditated and thoughtful sip, and then does the you know
Right.
and I think that further um, symbolizes kind of this life that they want.
Well, yeah, no, I could see that, and I definitely don't think that's an incorrect assessment of that scene. But I do want to point out that Kendall is very much the opposite of Brent.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I don't think that she is satisfied with her life. But which is evident when she goes to the model guy trying to get her old modeling job back. But she hides it and she lies to herself to say that everything is okay and I am happy. Because there's she has a flashback with the daughter, and the daughter is like putting on her makeup, and then she's like, "Oh, it's okay. You never have to be scared of me. I'm here for you." And that's cut in between the scenes where she is trying to kill the daughter. But then you also have the scene right after hot yoga when she's talking to her friend, and the friend is like, "Oh, I hate my daughter. She's so hot. Blah 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 blah." And then our character Kendall is like, "Well, I mean, it's not that bad." I don't remember exactly what she says, but she's not as distraught or torn up about being old. She seems to be at peace with it.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to you talking about the cyclical nature of things. There's there are things that are going to happen. You talked about all we have to do is live and die. And I think the other mom makes the point. She's like, "Oh, she's so hot," like you said. But one day those tits are going to drop, and the same thing happened to the mom. I'm sure that her mom looks at her the same way. All right, give me 1 second. Yeah, there's a cyclical nature of things, and I think that's you said she's at peace with it, and I think that honestly that is a admirable characteristic because at the end of the day, what can we do about that?
Right. And she at the very least seems to be at peace with it. But later on in the film, this is during the flashback with the pool table, and the dad freaks out. He sings the hokey pokey, and he smashes the table. And then he like sits down, and he explains to his wife, he hates his job, he hates his life. He used to be this really cool, awesome dude, doing donuts in the car. And he's like, "You wouldn't understand any of that." And she's like, "Well, actually, I do." And then she sits down next to him on the pole, and she says this, and I wrote this down word for word. She says, "All your life, you know it's coming. It's anxiety and terror because you know that one day you'll create this life, the hugeness of it, the importance of it. Everything is building up to that moment, and then it happens. And no matter what you thought it would be, it's not like that. It's just something that happens, and then it's over." And then the dad says, "I used to be Brent, and you used to be Kendall, but now we're just mom and dad."
We're just mom and dad. You know, are you gonna make me go into this little monologue I have written? Because
Do it.
I wrote like a little piece about that.
Do it.
There's a lot. Okay, okay. So this is basically what I think this movie's about, and we'll after hearing this, we'll get back into some other things. But yeah, you become mom and dad, and I think this is symbolic to the idea of the loss of individuality and dreams. Um, the want for destruction, the killing of their kids. Throughout the entire movie, they are always fighting. But it's interesting that the thought of killing their kids, it brings mom and dad closer. Um, Creation of family is the destruction of individuality, but I think that family is bigger than the self. It's a sacrifice. A new life brings a possibility of change, like you said, a second chance for a better future. But not only does it create a better future for our kids, necessarily for a better tomorrow for them, um, but it is shaping the children for them to create a better future for themselves. So
Okay.
it's not our responsibility to create the future. It is our responsibility to shape the children so they can create their better future. And I think that, that's what love and family is about. Ultimately, it's about giving up our dreams so that our child can have theirs. Um,
See,
so,
and I agree with that, but I think that actually
well, hold
goes.
on.
Okay.
I wasn't done. Thomas. Um, so it's not about. See, you messed up my train of thought.
All right. Well, then I'm just going to continue.
All right, okay. So I think that this film isn't about it's not about giving up the self for the sake of a better tomorrow for your kids. It's about giving up yourself so that your kids can have the ability to have a better tomorrow. But see, this is where it's interesting. This is where this duality comes in because if it's the parents' responsibility to develop their kids so that they can make a better future for themselves, because then the kids eventually, like Kendall says, are going to become parents. So then it's also going to be their responsibility. And it is just this never ending cycle.
Right. And that's actually what I was going to say. I was going to bring up planned obsolescence. It's Kendall says your whole life is building to having a kid. And then according to her, that's essentially your purpose. Is to create more life. But then, what do you do after that? Then, as the dad says, you lose who you were, and now you're just mom and or dad. And so it's this planned obsolescence where we're created to pump out a new model. And then, like, it's the difference between us and the iPhone is the iPhone itself is just created to die, whereas we are created to make the thing that is better than us. Like you were saying, it's not our job to create the better future. It's our job to create the kids so they can make their better future. But then, as you're saying, it's this endless cycle. So, if everyone's purpose is to just create another life, then it's never going to end.
And at the end of the day, what's the point of that?
Right. So then this movie says, well, to hell with that. We're going to instead take the lives that we created. And there's one point where there's a dad being interviewed on TV, presumably right after he has killed his kid. And he at first seems kind of remorseful, but then the newscaster asks him if he feels bad about it, and he says, no, it was exactly what I needed. So even though the parents, Kendall seems to believe, and this movie posits, that your job as a human is to become a parent, it is the desire of the parent to then escape their child that they have created. That's what this movie seems to be saying.
It is. But I think close to the end of the film, I think that breaks apart and evolves into something better, which we'll get to. But I want to talk about Nick Cage. I agree with you right now. Where we stand, I agree with you. But as we talk about it more, that thought will change. I want to talk about Nick Cage for a second. His character, Brent. Number one, dude. Brent's such a lame name. Can I just say that? Brent is such a he's supposed to be this rock star. What kind of name is Brent for a rock star? Come on, dude. Anyway, Nic Cage, we already said, is crazy in this movie. But there's two things I want to talk about specifically. Is so when Damon, Carly's boyfriend or whatever, is there, and Brent comes home. There's this action scene, where at first it's about beating up Brent, but then he hears the static and it's about killing his kids, which he still tries to kill Brent anyway, even though he's not his kid. But he does this wrestling move where like Damon's head is kind of close to the ground, and Nic Cage like he does like his hand all the way up, and then just bam smacks his head. Um, and I think we talked about hyperrealism before a little bit, but I think that this kind of symbolizes Nic Cage kind of living in this romanticized world. He's stuck in the past. He can't let go of his expectations of what his life was going to be.
Right.
And I think that, and you said it already, but I think that the wrestling move kind of extenuates that. Just on the idea of who actually does a wrestling move when they're fighting someone, And I think it's the same thing with the coffee. Nobody actually drinks coffee like that. But when you're stuck in the past like that, when you can't let go of your expectations like that, that's what it becomes.
Right.
And also, I think the destruction of the pool table, I think that's very important. Because I think that there's a level of acceptance in that. Because he's trying to create something. And I think it's fair that he wants like a family room or whatever. But I think that but the idea behind it, he's trying to create this space. And he talks about he's trying to create this space where there's boundaries. But I think that there's still the idea that he's thinking that this pool table will kind of fix the family relationship that they're in, and that this pool table will somehow bring them out of that. But it's still a very it's still like a dream. It's still like you know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I definitely think the pool table is important. What exactly it means, I'm not entirely sure. But as he is trying to set it up, the pool table is not level, and he keeps rolling this ball across to see if it's level. And I noticed this time the ball is actually the number 13 ball, and number 13 is considered to be unlucky. And then at the very end of the film, when they're sitting in the room, the ball rolls back to him and hits his hand, and he looks down at it and he laughs. So kind of attaching on to what you were saying about the pool table, bringing the family together. I think it's symbolic for the realization that he can't. He never will be able to escape his past self. Because as soon as he has it fixed and the ball's not rolling anymore, the wife comes down there and she's like, "What are you doing? Like you can't do this. You want a man cave? What? Like this isn't cool." And then they start arguing. And as they're arguing, the ball begins to roll again, even though he had the table level.
Yeah.
So I think that ball is kind of representative of either his belief and that he can't escape, his attempt to escape, or even just his sanity. And the fact that it rolls means that everything will always be off kilter. It will never be as he wants it to be, and he can't accept that.
Yeah, and I think that that's true for like anybody. Yeah, I agree with that, 100%.
The other thing that I think it means something. I don't know exactly what it means. Is the Sawzall, because it saws all. And they mentioned that like several times.
Within a span of like 15 minutes.
And so I feel like I have no idea what it could mean, but I feel like it has to mean something. I'm like spitballing here. I don't have anything written down. I didn't prepare anything for this. But so the Sawzall, thinking about like a family dynamic. They're trying to cut through the door to get to their kids. And the movie is about them trying to kill their kids. So maybe because it saws all, meaning it can cut anything, even though we see in the film that it's not true. It's the belief that they can cut ties with their children and become new, different, better people. But it doesn't work. So again, they're stuck where they are. And it's kind of like, the Hakuna Matata Lion King thing of you gotta put your past behind you and just move forward. It's like you can't change what already happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
their life now, whether they like it or not, your life as a parent is to be a parent to your children.
And you can either accept that or not.
Right.
But you're going to be happy accepting it. I want to backtrack a little bit, go back to the beginning. I want to point out a few things. So, a lot of the kids, and I think especially our main kids, especially Carly and her friend, a lot of them are portrayed as having poor behavior.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I was gonna say maybe not Josh, but he does like leave his toys everywhere, and he throws the ball at his dad's head.
Yeah.
I would say Damon definitely doesn't, but everyone else, yes.
Um, and their parents don't like their kids.
Right.
I think it's a very important, duality for this film, which we've already talked about. But I also want to talk about the teacher, who, as far as we know, does not have any kids.
Right.
As far as we know. But he cares about the kids, and I think that's evident, even the bad ones. And we see that he isn't affected by like
Right.
the static. Um, and I think that this may have to do with like, see this. I kind of have a theory that maybe the static isn't necessarily the cause of, um, is the cause of the mass hysteria. There's not a whole lot of evidence for this, but we see like all the parents, we never see them actually caring about their children, but we do see the teacher care about the children, and so I think that there's a level of like, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I would say you do through the flashbacks. You see Brent and Josh sitting on the sidewalk, but still to Brent, there's still that you could tell something's not right. But then with the mom, I think that the director wanted to very explicitly show that she does care for her children, and I think that is shown most clearly in the hospital when she takes her sister's baby and almost refuses to give it back to the doctors. So,
But that's
so
not. But that's not her kid.
no, I know, but I'm saying that was used to show her characteristically as a caring mother, as
Okay.
you do see in the flashback with her daughter when she puts on the makeup and she's like, "Oh, you never have to be scared of me." So I think that the director was trying to show the differences between Brent and Carla or Kendall, my bad, Brent and Kendall, and show that even though they are so different, they both end up at the same place.
Okay.
Um, I don't remember exactly what you were talking about.
Me. Let's move on. I want to pose a question here. Is Nic Cage racist in this movie?
Well, that's what the daughter's like. Well, I know why you don't want me to date him, and he's like, "Yeah, it's because you're a junior and he's a sophomore or backwards." I think it's the other way. But yeah, so she clearly is like, it's because he's black.
And I think we think that too, as an audience. But
I mean, I took his reason for face at face value, but yeah, the argument is there.
Because like the whole time, like I'm thinking that the um I think the director did this on purpose. I think it's a very intentional move here. Um, the maid, the kitchen cleaner, the lady is Chinese, which I think that, especially in America, especially in the deep South, that the go-to for a person who is Asian is they're Chinese.
Yeah.
Uh, and she also has a very like stereotypical like Mandarin Chinese accent.
Well, and even talking about being racist, the dad says something about Vietnamese people, and then the mom apologizes to the maid. So like
Yeah.
they don't even know the nationality of their own maid, nor do they care to find out.
Well, then she says something, and he turns around and he goes, "Hey, what is his?" He's like, "Fuck you."
Yeah,
But see, this is why I don't know because Nick Cage's character Brent is just kind of crazy.
yeah,
So I don't actually know if he is, but it's definitely set up for us to think that he is.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's anything like actually like deeper there. I think he's just unhinged, and his self resentment he takes that out on everybody. Maybe more so on the people that are different than him. So that would account for him being acting like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Um, but it's also interesting. Soon we, that's the um, maid's name, and Brent are both extremely crazy. Like she goes off speaking Mandarin a few times, just going. Um, and then Brent, I mean, we've seen, um, and like when they kill their kids, it does not seem that like different than how they already acted.
Yeah, especially Brent.
And like this is funny because soon um, when Carly, Josh, and Damon come home, she's cleaning the kitchen,
Yeah,
and she's like, "Oh, you want some lunch?" And that whole little interaction is hilarious because then she's like, "Why nobody clean kitchen? Why only I clean kitchen?" And then she goes off in Mandarin, and that's just hilarious.
I do think there is some comedic moments in this film. There's that, and then there's like the dude who's like he's carrying a bloody baseball bat, and he's just getting his mail. There is a few times in this movie that made me laugh. Um, there's one more thing I wanna talk about, and it's not a very long thing. So if you have any stray thoughts after me, you could go into them. But I hit the
Let me. I got one more stray thought, and then another like actual thought. Let me say my last stray thought, and then you can give
okay.
your last answer. Um, so at the scene at the school, um, when everybody's like in the yard, and the fence is between the mom or the parents and the kids, and then the
Yeah,
one kid gets over, and then all hell breaks loose. That's definitely a representation of how not prepared we are for a mass hysteria. Okay,
yeah.
that was it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we have not talked about Brent's parents at all. And there was a few things I thought about them, but there's one thing that I think is important, and that is at some point when, well, actually two things I guess they're both said by Brent's father. The first is when he first sees the grandkid. He's like, "Hey, there's my little piss and vinegar," and I have never heard that phrase
Yeah,
before ever in my life.
that's such a like a very that's such an abrasive like thing to call like someone a loved one. Which okay, yeah,
So I looked up that phrase, and apparently it means an abundance or excessive amount of boisterous, youthful energy, enthusiasm, or rowdiness. So I think that plays into the whole planned obsolescence, new model, but is the better model thing of the grandkid being the best version out of all of them. But another thing that the granddad says is this is directly to Brent. He says, I fought in wars. What have you done? And I think that feeds into what we've been talking about this whole time about Brent's resentment and living in the past. he's frustrated with the fact that he hasn't done anything, and the whole futility of his whole existence. And so we talked about planned obsolescence. We talked about the cyclical nature. We talked about the dysfunctional nature of families. But I think the last thing that this film is saying is that life is ultimately meaningless, right?
Yeah.
So the mom says, you know, you just have to have kids, and it's not what you expect, but you do it, and then it's over. And then the dad says, I had all these plans for my life, and none of them came true, and now I just hate myself. And then the granddad says, I fought in wars. What have you done? And so, like I said earlier, you're only really required to do two things, and that is be born and to die. But what you do in between there is up to you. So the fact that life is meaningless is not a bad or pessimistic outlook. It's just to say that you create your own meaning.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like, oh yeah, I 100% agree with that. And we've talked about this before. Is yeah, life is meaningless, and I think that there's some kind of philosophical. It's a branch of nihilism, but basically, yeah, like you said it, life is meaningless, but you can either wallow in misery about that, or you can not give a shit that it's meaningless and experience life.
And I think that those two different views are shown in Brent and the mom. I forgot her name again.
Kindle.
Kindle. So like Brent, is frustrated with the fact that he is not who he wanted to be, so he is sad and hates himself. But the mom seems to accept the fact. She's like, I had my kids. It wasn't what I expected, but that's okay. Life keeps going.
Yeah,
So
and
those two branching paths.
there is an immense amount of uh, beautiful poesy in that. I just say shout out to the director for that.
He also wrote the movie too. So this is like completely
Shout
his
out to the
vision. I'm
writer
gonna
for
look his name up.
Um,
But
so talking about Kendall and the parents, my favorite line in this entire movie is when Brent's mom is fighting with Kendall, and the mom and Brent's mom goes, "Kendall's not even a real name,"
yeah, that was really funny.
because like. I mean, it is because her name's Kendall, but also you're right because Kendall's not a real name. Like that definitely sounds like a model name.
Right. Whoa. Okay. This guy also directed the second Ghost Rider movie. Sorry. His name is Brian Taylor. So shout out to him for making Mom and Dad. But sorry, that got me off guard.
All right, you got anything else?
Wait, what were you saying? Oh yeah, Kendall's not a real name. Yeah, I thought that was funny. I don't have anything else to say.
Okay, so I've got two more things. One is I think that this is the realest scene in the movie. In this entire film, it's very hyper realistic in a sense, but also very outlandish. There's a lot of crazy shit happening. But this scene is very like down to earth. And there's a very strong message here, I think. I think it is not the overarching message or theme, but I think it is the most important. When Damon goes home, he walks to the door and like waves to the old lady or whatever. But
Are you talking about when he leaves the test?
and he goes home,
Yeah.
yeah, and he walks in and his dad is like passed out drunk, and he's like picking up his mess, and we get the sense that has happened before, not only before but often. Um, and then his dad hears the static, and this is five words. Please don't do this again. So
Yeah.
Damon's dad is going about to like kill him, or at least beat him, from what we can tell. Um, but what's happening in reality is very extraordinary. But Damon doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know about the static and the craziness. But his dad has done the likes of this before. So to him, this is just happening again. I think it's a very powerful message about domestic abuse in the family.
So what's the message?
Well, it's okay. It's more of like an awareness.
Okay, yeah.
Like be aware that this happens.
But it's also in this scenario of everyone is going after everyone. So potentially his father, like Brent, did not succeed to the status that he wanted to, and then now takes it out on his son. Whereas
Yeah.
Brent clearly wants to, but never actually gets a chance to.
Yeah. All right. That's all I had to say on that.
Okay.
And the last thing I want to talk about is the idea of the balance and the line between love and hate. And I think that there is a very, especially in the family sense, I think there's a very fine line between love and hate. So I think that there's this, and I think you'll agree, there's just this natural like love that happens within a family. You know,
Yeah.
no matter like it's the mom will always say like, no matter what you do, I will always love you. You're still my little baby boy, which is absolutely true. Not in this movie, but just in general.
In life.
Yeah, like even like, did you play God of War, right?
No, but I know about the son.
Yeah,
If
the
that's what you're
newest
talking
God of
about.
War. It's what's his name?
Boy,
No, not
it's like
no
Eros.
Freya.
Kratos?
No, Freya and her son.
Loki.
No,
Thor.
Chef Bourdain. What's his name? Bowden. What's his name?
I don't know.
Hold on, let me look this up. Balder. Balder is his name. Um, and so in God of War, I don't know if this is how it is in real Norse mythology, but basically, the mom gives him eternal life, and then Balder does a bunch of bad stuff and is about to kill his mom, but the mom's like, "I love you, son. No matter not even, I still love you even after all the bad things you've done, and even if you kill me now, I'll still love you because you're my little baby boy." And like the son loves his mother too, but he also hates her, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a natural thing that comes out of a relationship like family, like that, especially between parents. And we see this the fight throughout. We see this at the end of the movie throughout the fight, especially between Carly and Kendall. Is that like the Kendall is trying to kill Carly, but Carly's like, "Mom, I still love you. I'm sorry for all the things I said. I still love you, even though you're trying to shove a hanger in my face. I still love you." And I think that there's a few songs that play, especially during the end, that kind of point this out. The first one that I remember that I wrote down was when Jeannie has the baby, and then there's the static, and then the "Must Have Been Love" that plays, and then a little bit later, there's a song called "Unspoken Love" that plays, um, and then then Carly says something while Kendall's trying to kill her. She says, "We love each other, even though we can't stand each other."
Does she
And
say that?
then, yeah,
Okay.
and
I don't
then,
remember that.
and then during like while the car at the very end when the grandpa's trying to kill Brent, the song "Chains of Love" plays. So there's all these songs that talk about love during times of like hate.
Yeah. Well, then there's also the song that opens the film. It's called "Yesterday When I Was Young," and it's very much about what we were talking about with Brent and wishing you had done things in the past, blah blah blah. But it opens by saying, "It seems the love I've known has always been the most destructive kind. I guess that's why now I feel so old before my time." Which does talk about what we've been talking about this whole time, but I thought it was very interesting that it says that the love I've known is responsible for that.
It absolutely, it absolutely is. Family is like, it's a tricky thing, because you hate them, but you love them.
And you don't know why.
And the only reason you love them is because they popped out of your butt.
We might have to bleep that.
Yeah. The only reason you love them is because they're your kids, and that's it.
All right. Well, I think we talked a lot on this. We talked longer than I thought we would, honestly. And I have nothing else to say.
And you know what? It just goes to show that on the surface, a movie may look crazy and dumb, but when you really sit down and you think about it, there's a lot that can be said about it.
I agree, Jake. So, but before we go,
before we end the episode, we can't forget about this.
Did anybody blow up? I don't think anybody did.
But there was an explosion.
Where was it? Oh, yeah, the house.
Nobody blew up, but there was an explosion.
All right, that's at least a 3.
I would say a 3 also.
All right, so 3 out of 5 blow-ups. You heard it here first. Mom and Dad.
On our Ready or Not.
By Brian Taylor. What year it came out? I don't know.
2018.
A couple years ago. It came out when I was in high school. All right. So that's all for this episode. Jake, do you want to tell the people where they can talk to us or send us videos of their parents, and I can tell them what the meaning of their parents are?
Yes, please do send us videos of your parents. I would love to talk about the meaning behind that. Yeah, any questions? You want to call us ugly? That might hurt my feelings, but it's a free country, so you can do that. Just hit us up on Twitter.
Now.
What?
It's a free country for now.
It is a free country for now. You can hit us up at Twitter, on Twitter, at PacinoPod, or you can shoot us an email at, is it podcast? I always forget.
PacinoPodcast@gmail.com.
There you go. And you can call us dumb, too, if you want to. Any recommendations? We'd love to hear them. But until next time.
Stout and sauerkraut.
Big old juicy stout and sauerkraut.